The autumn wind whispered through the ancient oaks of Glendale Cemetery as Thomas Harrington walked along the familiar stone path. At 34, his once carefree stride now carried the weight of someone far older, the success that had defined his public image. The founder of a tech company worth billions meant nothing during these private visits. Thomas held a bouquet of white lilies, their petals glowing against his charcoal suit. Every week, for the past 2 years, he had made the same journey to visit Elizabeth, his wife. His heart, taken too soon. She was only 29 when a sudden illness, swift and merciless, stole her away, leaving doctors powerless and Thomas alone. In the sprawling mansion they had just completed together. "Good morning, Lizzie," he said softly, as he approached the elegant marble headstone. The morning sunlight reflected off its polished surface, making the engraved letters shimmer. Elizabeth and Harrington, beloved wife, cherished daughter. Eternal lightest. He knelt down to place the fresh flowers in the stone vase. Something unusual caught his eye. The area around Elizabeth's grave looked different, cleaner than the surrounding plots. The marble appeared freshly wiped, and the small decorative pebbles around the base had been thoughtfully rearranged into a pattern of concentric circles. This wasn't the work of the cemetery's groundskeepers, who maintained a respectful but minimal presence. Thomas ran his fingers along the marble, noticing how it gleamed more brightly than usual. Someone else had been tending to Elizabeth's resting place, someone besides him. He sat down on the small bench he had installed the year before, letting memories flood his mind, as they always did. Their first date at the university coffee shop, the way Elizabeth laughed with her entire being, how she insisted they donate half of their fortune to children's education charities. The pain had softened from a sharp, searing wound into a dull, persistent ache one Thomas had slowly learned to carry, lost in thought. He almost didn't notice the small figure approaching from the far side of the cemetery. A girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, was making her way toward him, her steps hesitant and slow. Her clothes, though clean, were worn thin. Her shoes were scuffed beyond repair. In one hand, she held a small cloth, and in the other, a single daisy with a slightly bent stem. She came to an abrupt stop when she saw Thomas. Her eyes widened, not just with recognition, but something more, fear. She began to retreat, but in her rush, tripped over an uneven patch of ground. The water bottle fell from her hand, and she let out a small cry as she hit the earth. Thomas was on his feet in an instant, quickly closing the gap between them. "Are you all right?" he asked, offering his hand to help her up. The girl nodded, but didn't take his hand. She scrambled to her feet on her own. Up close, Thomas could see her more clearly, dark hair pulled back into a tidy yet fraying braid, intelligent eyes full of both weariness and quiet strength, and cheeks hollow from too many skipped meals. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. "I didn't know you'd be here today. You usually come on Saturdays." Thomas tilted his head, caught off guard. "You know who I am." She nodded again, holding the cleaning cloth tightly in her small hand. "You're Mr. Harrington. You bring white lilies to Mrs. Elizabeth, and you are?" Thomas asked gently. "Lily," she replied. The irony of her name struck Thomas deeply. "It's nice to meet you, Lily. Have you been?" He gestured toward the headstone, its unusually pristine appearance now making perfect sense. Lily's eyes welled with tears. "I'm sorry if I did something wrong. Her voice faltered. "I just wanted to make sure it was nice for her. You've been cleaning my wife's grave." Thomas stated softly, not as a question, but as a quiet realization. The girl gave a small nod, a tear slipping down her cheek. "And I talk to her sometimes," she added. "I hope that's okay." Something shifted inside Thomas. Curiosity mingled with a strange, unexpected sense of connection. "Why Elizabeth's grave, Lily?" he asked. "There are hundreds here." Lily looked down at her worn-out shoes, then lifted her gaze to the headstone. "Because she was kind to me before." A chill passed through Thomas, one that had nothing to do with the autumn wind. "You knew Elizabeth?" Lily nodded, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a frayed, faded library card. "I used to go to the reading program at the children's library downtown. Mrs. Elizabeth came every Thursday to read us stories. She remembered all our names." Her voice softened as she continued. She noticed when I hadn't eaten and started bringing me sandwiches. She never made me feel ashamed. Thomas stared at the little girl, memories suddenly rising. Elizabeth speaking of the children she met through her volunteer work at the library foundation they funded. She would return home with stories of gifted kids stuck in difficult situations, and how she was determined to help them find a way out. After she stopped coming, one of the other volunteers told us she had gone to heaven. Lily continued, I asked where heaven was, and they said people who go there have special places in the cemetery. I looked for her name for 3 days after school, and you found her, Thomas whispered, his throat tightening. Lily nodded. I couldn't bring big flowers like you do, but I could keep her place clean, and I could still tell her about my week like she used to let me do at the library. Thomas looked at this small child, this quiet, determined soul who had been honoring Elizabeth in her own way, and something broke open within him. For 2 long years, he had grieved in solitude, surrounded by well-meaning friends who never truly understood the depth of Elizabeth's compassion. Where are your parents, Lily? He asked gently. My mom works 3 jobs, she said with the blunt honesty only children with grown-up lives possess. She drops me at school early and picks me up late. Sometimes I come here after school before going to my neighbor's apartment. Thomas thought of the Children's Education Foundation he and Elizabeth had created, how she had insisted they focus not only on scholarships, but on full family support. The foundation had continued after her passing, led by capable hands, but Thomas had withdrawn from it, consumed by grief. Would you like to sit with me for a while? Thomas asked, motioning toward the bench. We could both talk to Elizabeth, and maybe you could tell me about the reading program these days. Lily hesitated, then gave a small nod. As they sat together, she gently placed her daisy beside Thomas's lush bouquet. Mrs. Elizabeth always said, even the smallest flowers are important, Lily said. Carefully straightening the stem, Thomas looked at the child beside him, then at the 2 offerings, the lavish arrangement he had brought, and her single, slightly wilted bloom. Yet both were placed with the same love. She was right, he said softly, as she usually was. For the next hour, Thomas listened as Lily shared stories of Elizabeth he had never heard before. How she used different voices for each character in the books, how she kept granola bars in her purse for kids who hadn't eaten, how she had launched a winter coat drive for students with nothing to wear in the cold. As the shadows grew longer across the cemetery, Thomas realized this child, this stranger, had kept Elizabeth's spirit alive in ways he had not. While lost in the silence of his own sorrow, Lily, he said at last, his voice full of quiet emotion, I think Elizabeth would be very happy that you've been visiting her. And I think she'd want me to ask you, Thomas said gently. Would your mother let you show me the reading program sometime? The foundation that runs it. Elizabeth and I started it, but I haven't visited in a long time. Lily's eyes widened. You're the one who makes the books possible, Thomas nodded. Elizabeth was the heart behind it all. I just provided the funding, but I think it's time I saw it again, through her eyes. The following week, with Lily's mother's permission, Thomas visited the downtown library. He watched children gather on colorful rugs, their faces lighting up with excitement at the promise of new stories. He noticed the worn-out books desperately needing replacement, the devoted volunteers who carried on Elizabeth's mission, and an empty corner full of potential where a technology center could one day open new worlds to children without access to computers at home. In Lily's simple, heartfelt act of tending a grave, Thomas had discovered more than just a connection to Elizabeth's memory. He had found a way forward. With his renewed involvement, the foundation grew stronger. Library hours were extended to better serve working parents. Meal programs were introduced so no child would sit through story time on an empty stomach. And a space for learning blossomed into something even greater. And every Friday afternoon, if you happened to visit Glendale Cemetery, you might catch a glimpse of a man and a young girl sitting together on a bench beside a gleaming headstone. They shared stories, they shared silence, and they always brought 2 kinds of lilies, one carefully purchased, the other wild and freely picked, for a woman whose compassion still bloomed long after she was gone.